Hello, everyone. This is Michele Amitrani, and thank you for joining me for another of my interviews. Today's guest is blogger, entrepreneur, designer, and content creator Joel Friedlander, the founder of thebookdesigner.com, a website that focuses on sharing practical advices to help build better books. He is the author of several non-fiction books about self-publishing, marketing, and design, and his website has consistently been listed among the best websites for writers by Writers Digest and by the Alliance of Independent Authors. In this exclusive interview, Joel and I talk about his career in the publishing industry and explore many subjects related to book publishing, including self-publishing, marketing, and productivity. Hi, Joel. Thank you for taking the time to answer these questions for us. Your website, bookdesigner.com, helps authors and publishers to craft great-looking and properly constructed books. What would you say is the main reason that made it so popular?
Well, that has been a question I've been trying to answer myself for several years, Michele. I think that when I started this site, which was in late 2009, there really wasn't any resource available online for people who wanted to know the nuts and bolts of how books are put together. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, there was a large and growing group of authors who wanted to take control of their own publishing because the tools of publishing had become available to individual authors. And with the advent of print on demand, anybody could print a print book for virtually no money at all. So The self-publishing revolution opened up. There were all these people interested in stuff like fonts and page margins and the other esoterica of book design that just hadn't been there before. And my approach, Michele, has always been to write in a conversational style and use my expertise in the publishing and marketing industries to explain things in an easy to understand way. And I think that, more than anything, has accounted for the popularity of my blog.
On this, I would also like to ask you, your site is not only an archive where people can find tons of information about all the subjects you were talking about, but as an author myself, your blog is on my top 5 lists of websites with useful tips and resources on writing and publishing. Now, let me ask you this question. If you would have to name your top 5 favorite blogger or the top bloggers that you follow, who would they be?
Well, I follow a lot of blogs, Michele. If you saw my Feedly, I use the Feedly feed reader. I have about 250 sites in that reader. And because I curate a lot of content for my audience, which is another thing that people really like. And they, when you're a blogger or you're running a site, the big challenge to me is to keep giving people a reason to come back again. One of the blogs on the top of my list is another curated blog, The Passive Voice. Mm-hmm. And I like that because David Vandergriff, who runs it, just has a very wide net and captures lots of interesting bits from all different sites. Another site, when I was a young blogger, that not a site that I follow so much today, but I learned a huge amount from as far as operating online and becoming a successful blogger, was ProBlogger.net. Run by Darren Rouse, a very experienced and highly successful blogger. Another blogger I follow is
Oh,
michaelhyatt.com.
yes, yes, that's very famous. Michael Diet, yes.
Yeah, because Michael came out of the book publishing industry and became a blogger and then entered what you might call the leadership space. But his roots are still in book publishing.
Yeah,
And
motivation, and he's from Nashville, if I'm not mistaken.
yes,
Mm.
and that's because that's where the company that he was the CEO of Nelson, the biggest Bible publisher in the world at one time. I also follow Joanna Penn's blog very closely, thecreativepenn.com.
Yes. Mhm.
We've been friends for years and colleagues, and I just like her content. I think she really approaches things in a simple and down-to-earth way that just helps lots and lots of people. And, there are many others. I could keep going. I think I got to 4 there, but hopefully that will suffice.
And that's for sure. That's most of them I know. I know Michael Hyatt has been like for me, for myself, a polar star in the sense that he really provided a lot of information about, in the case of leadership, but also like publishing industry. And he has a podcast that's hugely famous. He has this is a blog that has been running for like years and years and years. And of course, Joanna Penn, which I had the pleasure to interview myself. Now, Joel, what kind of researches do you do, and how long do you spend researching before beginning any kind of project? It can be a new book, an online course, anything.
Well, that's a big question because, I mean, I sometimes research blog posts, then that might take 15 minutes to an hour to do the research I need for a blog post. On the other hand, I also write books, and the research on a book could take it could take longer to do the research than to write the book. I mean, that's not uncommon for nonfiction authors. In other words, if you plan out a nonfiction book and you plan it properly, and then you break it down into the pieces that are convenient for you to write and to, construct the book, by the time you finish doing the research for every part of the book, you've probably kind of already written it in your head because you know what you're going to say. So the writing usually goes very quickly. On the other hand, I also create digital products, marketing products for authors, stuff like that. We're just finishing up a promotion today, in fact, for a product called the Publishing Business in a Box. This is only of interest to authors in the United States, but the research, we spent about 3 months on the research on that, along with the author who is actually an attorney and a self-published author. So it really depends on the scale of the project, and the longer projects do require quite a bit more research. And maybe that's one of the advantages of fiction, eh?
All the science fiction and fantasy authors out there.
Yeah.
So,
and Joanna Penn was just reminding me that one of the big advantages of writing fiction is that you never have to update it. And that's kind of attractive to me because I have a lot of stuff that needs updating.
But can I ask you now, if I may, what was the most difficult book you ever written and why?
The most difficult book I ever wrote was my first book. And I wrote that in 1985.
Okay.
And it was not on the subject of book publishing. It's called Body Types, the Enneagram of Essence Types. It's just kind of a weird psychological idea. And I spent well over a year researching and writing that book. And then I spent about another year researching and rewriting the book for a second edition I did. But the reason it took me so long was because I was a new author. And every day it was very difficult for me to sit down and make the kind of progress I wanted to make. I didn't like the style I was writing in. I didn't like the way it was coming out. I didn't like the way it read. And so it was actually kind of a painful process. It was only many years later that I really understood how to tap into my own creative potential, that stream of creativity that's always running nonstop, and to actually be able to write in a flowing conversational style that actually doesn't need that much editing. And that I spent 2 years practicing something we call free writing. And free writing is writing to a prompt as fast as you can for a set amount of time and trying to not interfere with what's being written. In other words, you never stop. You just keep going as fast as you can. And the idea is to write faster than you can think. And the effect of this was I became much more nimble at writing and accessing my own creativity. And that the funny thing was that turned out to be the best possible preparation for starting a blog ever. Because by the time I started my blog, I could write like 1,000-word blog post in maybe 45 minutes.
And now that you're talking about the blog posts, something I found super interesting. In your blog post, you often talk of niche market and of the need to understand a target audience. Do you think for an author it's best to be original or to deliver to readers what they want?
Well, I don't see that as an or question. I think it's best to be original and give readers what they want. In other words, somebody asked me this question today about book covers, which is another area where you could ask the same question, because authors are always being told, look, if your book is a romantic thriller, then people have to be able to recognize that's what it is from halfway across the room. Otherwise, your cover has failed, because the people who like romantic thrillers are just going to walk past your book.
Right.
They won't recognize it. So the person who was asking me said, well, that feels very constrained. Why do I have to stay in those boundaries? I want to be more creative. And it's the exact same answer. You can be as creative as you want to be, but don't forget your readers.
Okay, so you can operate on this scheme, just don't go too much crazy about it. Like, there are rules. If you know them, you can break them, but you have to be always mindful of what your readers or the other side of the product chain there are.
Well, that's a good way to put it. And I'm thinking of the connection we have to the reader, or the one that we're trying to make. And for instance, designing my romantic thriller so that romantic thriller readers will recognize it right away, that's what I'm talking about. We don't want to lose that connection we're making. But within that, once we have that connection, then we could be totally creative. It's, as creative as you want to be. Just don't lose that connection.
That totally makes sense to me. Because we are talking about blog post, in the blog post called or titled Lessons Learned from 5 Years as an Author Entrepreneur, author Joanna Penn, we were talking about her, lists 3 lessons she learned, and her number 1 was, and I'm quoting, "I can't do everything myself. I have to work successfully with other people." Now, my question is, how do you find the right people to help you craft a better book?
Well, that's a great question, and one I've had to answer repeatedly. I'll tell you, the idea of collaborating has been very powerful for me. I mean, there's 2 or 3 different kinds of help you can get. You can have friends who are knowledgeable help you, you can hire people to help you, or you can collaborate with somebody on the project. Now, for me, I have a lot of ideas. I'm very prolific with ideas, but I only have so much time. So I have a lot of ideas that nothing happened with them. They didn't go anywhere. And then a few years ago, I discovered that if I collaborated with someone, it solved many of the problems I was having actually getting something done. For instance, if I partner with somebody to create, let's say, some book templates, all of a sudden I'm accountable to that person. I can't push this project off, which I would do probably if I'm busy and it's only me. I would just push it to the side. But, if I told Tracy I'm going to be there on Thursday with new designs for those templates, well, then I have to be there, don't I?
Mm-hmm.
I have no
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah. This is, yeah.
Already committed. So this one idea, this simple little idea, is responsible for most of the productivity I've had over the last 3 or 4 years, because I discovered this and I started using it obsessively. I've partnered and done joint venture partnerships and affiliate partnerships and building products together with people, training courses. And so people ask me, well, Joel, how can one person do all this stuff? And, my secret is I'm not doing it all. I'm doing each thing with somebody else. Okay, so how to find those people? There are a lot of ways to find vendors. If you need to find an editor, if you need to find a book formatting person or book layout or a cover designer, there are some great resources. I actually published a book called The Self-Publisher's Ultimate Resource Guide that has over 800 curated resources for self-publishing authors. There are also some great marketplaces online that have come up in the last couple of years that try to match authors to vendors, and they monitor this so you're not going to run into crooks on their site. And that would be places like BiblioCrunch or Publish or Readsy. All have a component where they match match authors to vendors. Now, on my side, Michele, one of the interesting things is if you have a successful blog, then you'd be surprised how many resources you already have that you don't know about. Now, I started a business in 2013 creating pre-designed book templates for Microsoft Word. And the only reason I was able to do that is because I found somebody who knew how to do Microsoft Word. I didn't think it could be done, to be honest with you. And I had been telling people for 2 years, don't try to do a book in Microsoft Word. It won't work. So nobody listened to me. They all ignored me, and they just went back to what they were doing. And so I decided to give it a try. And I found someone to help me. And that person was a commenter on my blog. Like all bloggers, I read all the comments, and I noticed this person, and I noticed that he was very technical. I asked him to write an article for me on a technical subject. He did a great job. And the next thing you know, we started a company together.
Wow. From a comment? Wow.
He was a commenter. That's how I first met him. And I'm going to tell you how he got on my blog, too. He actually read an article I wrote on the CreateSpace community forums.
I think I read that article. Like, it helped me with my book. You collaborate, and you were talking on that article, if I'm not mistaken, about what kind of font is better, how you format for the paperback version. Yes, I read that, and it was super helpful.
It's actually kind of odd, because what happened was, at the time, this was a few years ago, they really wanted to put some educational content up for their people who use CreateSpace.
Yes.
And I ended up writing a lot of articles for them. And then after I did that, I believe the woman who was running that program got promoted, and I don't think they put anything there since. So all those articles I wrote years ago are still sending a lot of traffic to my blog. And this fellow happened to be one of those people. We now own a company with 4 different e-commerce websites doing all kinds of business.
I see. That's very interesting. I did not know the behind the scene. This is from a juicy story anyways. And I definitely, again, read that article on CreateSpace. It was super helpful. And I think, I don't want to say stupid things, but I think that was one way thanks to which I came to discover your blog. So I was another one of that people like drawn to your blog thanks to that Creative Space article. Now, Joel, how does it look for you, the publishing industry 10 years from now? And I'm asking you this because I know it's a difficult question to ask, especially nowadays when periods are like attention span are very short, and nobody knows what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes. But again, I want to reiterate these questions to you. And what do you think it's going to look like, the publishing industry 10 years from now?
10 years from now, that's a long time in the technology world, isn't it? If you think 10 years earlier in time, and all the changes that have happened just from technology alone in the last 10 years, we can see that our imagination is probably not sufficient to figure out what's going to be happening. But I'll tell you this. The one thing that has proven to be very, very persistent is people's love for printed books. Printed book sales have not gone down. They're still going up. People love buying printed books. They have always far outsold ebooks of all kinds, and they continue to do so. There's just a really, really strong attraction that people have for that book that you can hold, go to the beach, jump into bed, underline, turn down the pages, whatever it is. Look at the pictures. People love printed books. I think that's still going to be true 10 years from now. And now it may be that we can produce the books faster, we could do them cheaper, we can distribute them faster. Maybe 10 years from now you can order a printed book, and receive it locally in like 6 hours instead of having to wait for somebody to ship it to you. Distributed print on demand would be something I'd be looking for. So, that would cut down on the shipping and delivery time. Right. On the other side, I get pitches from people every day, as you might imagine. And most of the pitches I get are related to ebooks. Either new sites they want to put up that would allow people to discover ebooks, ebook lending, ebook promotion, just all kinds of sites. Now, the problem, and many of these look very nice, and they have a germ of interest to them, but obviously, virtually none of them are going to survive. There's just not enough traction there for all these people with their great ideas. They're just not going to get enough people to survive. So I think that the biggest shift we've seen in recent years, in my mind, is not the e-reader, it's the smartphone. People are reading on their phones. And at this point, you can buy a screen that's whatever size you want. You want a 4-inch screen, a 5-inch screen, a 7, a 9. You decide the screen you want. And I think the displays are fantastic. Some of the typography is really good. And I think that's going to eat up all the rest of the reading outside of print books. That's my opinion.
I see. That was very, very interesting. The paperback or hardcover and slash anything you can smell the feeling of the pages and all that thing is going to remain 10 years from now for Joel Friedlander. Now, as an avid, as you know, I told you I'm an avid consumer of your content. I need to ask you this question. Is there a fiction book anywhere in your writing list? I need to know.
Well, there is one, but it hasn't gotten written. Yes, I have a story I'd like to tell, and I would like to tell it as fiction. And I have written a lot of stories. I don't publish them. I actually write stories, and then I do audio recordings that I distribute privately. And I just do it for my own enjoyment. So I do have a book that's just about to come out, probably in the next few months. And I'll give you an exclusive on that. I mean, I may have mentioned it to somebody. I'm not saying that this is the first time I've talked about it, but it's not about book publishing. I'm actually getting ready to publish a book on creativity. And I'm really excited about that because most of the writing I do is instructional. And this book I wrote really for my own satisfaction and to share these ideas with other creatives. So I'm pretty excited about that.
That's very interesting. Let's finish up with what I would define as a rather profound question. In these years of blogging and writing, you have influenced a lot of people with your articles, with your books, by connecting with other writers and contributing in the self-publishing community. Now, at the end of the day, how would you like people to remember Mr. Joel Friedlander?
That's a good question. Well, the three legs that I've built my stool on are being authoritative, being likable, and being trustworthy. So, in other words, I want to write stuff that people know they can believe what I'm saying because I have the authority to say it, that I say it in such a way that they think I'm a likable person and that they can trust me. Like if I say I'm going to publish on Wednesday and Friday, you better believe I'm going to publish every Wednesday and Friday because that's what builds trust when you do what you say you're going to do. So that's all that I've tried to do, Michele, is to just establish my authority, my likability by just being nice and helpful to people, and my trust by doing what I said I was going to do. So I've tried to do that as best as I can. I've tried to educate authors. I've tried to spread the ideas of what is the best practice in book publishing to as many authors as I could. And I continue to do that. 2 days ago, I was down in Redwood City, California, which is about an hour from here, talking to a whole bunch of writers at the California Writers Club. And I just love doing that. I just love helping people. And I'll tell you a story. My father was a printer, and I grew up kind of in the printing trades because he started as a printer, an apprentice in 1914. Right. So I loved watching him work. He had beautiful hands. He had really beautiful small muscle control. He would do typesetting or doing the make ready on a press. And he just knew so much, and he had this just in his hands. And of course, then he got old, and then he passed away. And I was sad about the fact that nothing remained of what he knew and his wisdom and skill. And I kind of started to think, I wish I had interviewed him and written a book about it because we could have put that into our culture. This is one of the reasons that I'm so enthusiastic about self-publishing. You don't have to sell a lot of books to have a successful publication. I've participated in book publishing projects that were really intended to only be read by maybe 10 or 20 people. But those people, when they read that book, it was going to change their lives. I consider that a successful publication. You don't have to sell thousands of copies. You just have to meet the goal that you set yourself. So my desire is to see people put their own wisdom, their experiences, their expertise into the culture so that it can be there as a record and they can share it with other people. That's really what I'm trying to accomplish.
That was very interesting, and I really appreciate you sharing with us that bit of information about your past. I think it defines you more as a person. It gives away more your personality and basically explain why you're doing what you're doing. Now, just to finish up these interviews, I wanted to give the opportunity to the other stalkers. I said stalkers because I believe I feel like I bother you so much for these interviews. I wrote so many times. I should have stopped, I believe, but I want to at the end I finally had some times with you, and I really appreciate that. And I want to give other stalkers to the internet and the possibility to ask you, where can listeners find you?
Well, I operate many websites, but the best way to contact me, find out about what I'm doing, and I also have a lot of free stuff for people, including 1,700 articles on book publishing, is to go to my blog, and that's at thebookdesigner.com. And that's my central location, and that's where you'll get all the information you need. So stalk away.
And that's where all the stalkers will go from now on. Joel, thanks again for your time. A gigantic good luck to you and to your future projects.
Well, thank you, Michele. It has been absolutely fun talking to you, and I didn't feel stalked at all.